Donald Trump's endorsed candidate in Georgia for governor, got absolutely trounced in the Republican primary, revealing that Trump may not have the complete hold over the Republican electorate that we previously thought. Quickly before we jump into today's video, yesterday some of y'all noticed in my video I had a really bad sunburn and my shirt was a little unbuttoned, so you could see my neck and chest were just two different colors. So I apologize for that. I really do. I got really sunburned and it looked really weird. I just gotta apologize up front. But then the second quick thing is, for anyone who didn't see yesterday's video, I am traveling this entire week, and so as you can see, I'm not in my normal studio. I will be back next week home, and everything will be back to normal. I just like to say that because I'm really a stickler about having, you know, high quality lighting and video and all that type of stuff, audio. And so when I don't have that, I want to let you know why. Right now I'm just doing this off of a phone, ring light, and a little microphone, but we're making it work. I want to make sure to still get content out to you guys. Okay, so let's jump in to today's topic. Brian Kemp is the current governor of Georgia, and if you remember during the whole 2020 election debacle, Trump claiming it was stolen, wanting Georgia to overturn its election results, Brian Kemp did come out and say, nope, election was secure here, those claims are not true. And I remember at the time, you know, we gave him credit. He's not someone we would agree with probably on almost anything, but on this, he did not go along with Trump's lies, and that was a really good thing. Well, of course, that caused Trump to absolutely turn on him. Oh, Brian Kemp's a rhino. He was no longer supportive of him and wanted to back a primary opponent against Brian Kemp. So David Perdue, which if you remember was a Republican senator from Georgia, just got defeated in the last election by Jon Ossoff, but he popped back up and decided to run against Brian Kemp, and Trump endorsed him. So I think the idea for David Perdue was, look, Trump really doesn't like Brian Kemp, the base is with Trump, so I'll run, get Trump's support because he's still mad about Brian Kemp not backing his election lies, and then I'll be able to win. But the election just happened and Brian Kemp destroyed David Perdue, getting 73.7% of the vote, and David Perdue only got 21.8% of the vote. So why is this a big deal? Well, it reveals, while of course Trump is still popular among Republicans, he doesn't have complete universal control over the way that they vote. And so in this case, he campaigned against Brian Kemp, you know, he endorsed David Perdue. He did everything to let his base know, we're going with David Perdue, we hate Brian Kemp, but yet Brian Kemp not just skirted by a win, he crushed and won against David Perdue. And I obviously will say, Brian Kemp isn't someone that I would like generally, of course, but in this analysis, it's super interesting to see someone who Trump is against actually do really well in a primary. And I think a lot of people have been saying, I think this is definitely correct, Trump and allies are going to base his ability to run successfully for president in 2024 off of how much of a kingmaker he is in 2022. And so if Republicans just follow the way that he leads them in the midterms, then he probably has enough hold over them to run in 2024. But in cases like this, if the base doesn't go in the direction he tells them, that's not a good sign for him. And then as another layer to this, Brad Raffensberger, if you remember, Trump had that famous call where he said, you find me 11,000 something, the exact number of votes he needed to win. Come on, find me that amount of votes. And Brad Raffensberger also stood against Trump in that case and said, listen, there wasn't fraud. I can't just find you a bunch of votes to make you win this election. So of course, expectedly, Trump turned on him as well, endorsed a different candidate, and Brad Raffensberger also beat the Trump-endorsed candidate. And so in these two major, highly publicized cases where Trump was against the incumbent, endorsed someone else, the incumbents held their ground. And that could say something specifically about Republican voters in Georgia, but either way it goes, Donald Trump just does not have complete authority over the tides of the Republican electorate. And just as kind of a last point on this, some of the articles I was reading about this talked about how Mike Pence came out and endorsed Brian Kemp in that race and campaigned for him, and how this shows that maybe Pence has a really good chance of defeating Trump in a 2024 primary because the person he endorsed beat the person that Trump endorsed. I'm gonna just have to say, guys, nonsense. It is interesting that Pence came out and endorsed the opposite person than Trump endorsed. It just shows they're not aligned. of course, that's very interesting, but two things on that just to me make it not that interesting. The first, Pence waited a really long time to endorse Kemp, so I just think he saw, hey, Kemp's gonna win, I can hop on that bandwagon. And the second thing is, just because Pence jumped on and, hey, I pick him, he didn't make a difference in that race, doesn't mean that if he went head to head with Trump, he would have any chance. If you look at his polling among Republicans, it's not great. So I don't really know why that's a narrative. Oh, Pence might challenge Trump. I mean, he could challenge him. No chance he could beat Trump in a Republican primary. That's just, you don't even have to give any thought to that. Zero. But getting away from Pence specifically, as I've said many times throughout this video, it is definitely fascinating that just because Trump puts his full-throated support behind you doesn't mean that you're gonna win. That's definitely something to be noted. This has happened many times in the past where Trump-endorsed candidates have lost, but this particular one was such a big publicized feud because Trump really wanted them to go along with his lies during the actual 2020 election so that he could stay in power in that moment. It's not just people saying, I don't know if the election's stolen, and then Trump freaks out. We're talking about in the moment they had this feud that caused Trump to get super mad at them because they wouldn't go along with his election lies. And after all of that, they're still able to remain popular among Republican voters. That's very, very fascinating. So while we're left kind of rooting for people that we wouldn't usually root for, Kemp and Raffensberger, oh, that's kind of weird. It is definitely a good sign that Trump doesn't have complete and total authority over the decision making of the Republican electorate.